Welcome into the I-80 Boys College Football Show. As always, I'm your host, old C motherfucking Hunt. And that old butt plug over there is...
That would be Chris Vaca. How's it going, Christian? What do you know? What have you been up to? It's fucking hot outside. I'm sure you're sweating off tons of pounds, probably working in your favor.
Yeah, dude, I definitely am. I think it's, it's motherfucking Friday, dude. Cheers to the weekend.
Amen.
Cheers to the weekend. Chris, what's been up with you? What have you been up to over there? I know the heat doesn't favor you old fuck.
Yeah, no shit, man. I almost had a croak out there mowing my yard the other day. No, I'll tell you what, no. I'm doing all right, Christian. Like you said, man, I'm happy it's fucking Friday. Gonna drink some goddamn beer. We're gonna talk some college football. No, it's good, man. I'm happy the weekend's here. We got the 4th of July to look forward next week, so I'm pretty pumped up, my man.
Awesome, brother. Well, are you ready to get into a little college football here then?
Oh, let's go, baby. Let's go.
All
It seems
right.
like it's right around the corner, man. We're getting there.
Yeah, and I don't even know how many days we've got and counting right now, but I am fucking ecstatic for the season to start.
I am too, man. I am. There's a lot of teams this year, I feel, Christian, that like a lot riding on this particular year for some of these programs, right? Like Florida State, right? I mean, they're one of them. LSU, another one, right? Georgia, can they three-peat? There's a lot of storylines. Alabama, are they falling off a cliff? You know what I mean? Like there are so many. I shouldn't say falling off a cliff, but I mean for Alabama standards, though, you know, like there's just so many programs. Obviously, Nebraska, what are they going to do this year under Rule? Like there's a lot of like question marks, man. That's what I'm really pumped up for this season. Whatever happens, but like there's going to be some crazy storylines.
Yeah, you said it best. There's always a team that's really highly hyped up in the offseason that comes in and they disappoint, they shit the bed. And then there's always a team like TCU that comes out of nowhere, or Cincinnati that comes out of nowhere and takes the world by storm.
Absolutely.
And ends up getting knocked out of the playoffs. But I digress. It's still a fun thing, and it's still why I love college football.
Oh, yeah.
Chris, speaking of all of that, here's a team that might be on the rise here, UAB. Coach Trent Dilfer. He has a pretty strong message here to some of the coaches trying to poach his players. What do you think about this?
If anybody, a little history on Trent Dilfer, right? He won a Super Bowl with the Ravens. I mean, the guy, and this is going to sound terrible, was probably one of the worst quarterbacks to ever win a Super Bowl as far as like his stat lines go. But he had that great defense with Ray Lewis, right? So then he went on to ESPN, and he worked for them for quite a while before becoming a head coach. And I can't remember where the hell he was at before UAB. He was I think it was a 1AA school somewhere. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Don't quote me. But he's a competitor. I did like him on ESPN. He kind of a very realistic guy. Said what he wanted to, and kind of lives his life that way, right? And obviously with this statement, this is exactly what he did, Christian. I don't see anything wrong with it. I believe it was Pat Narduzzi a couple years ago with Pitt, when they were really good with Jordan Addison. Lincoln Riley came in and poached him. He transferred last year or 2 years ago over to USC, which would have been last year. I know Narduzzi said some shit in the media about that. A lot of coaches don't publicly say that kind of crap, but he was pretty pissed about it. I would have been too. As you guys know, Jordan Addison, I believe, was the 22nd or 23rd pick in the draft this year. I think he was the third receiver off the board. Hell of a player. And I would be pissed too. So, like, I'm not mad about what Trent's doing, Christian. Maybe you have a different take on this than I do. But I get it, man. I understand it. But then on the other side of the spectrum, coach is going to be like, well, I can fucking talk to a kid anytime I want. There are rules and regulations about poaching and that stuff too, but we know all that shit goes on. I don't have a problem with him saying this overall, Christian. I really don't. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it either. I mean, this was on the Rick and Bubba show. Dilfer said he's not going to take kindly to it, right? He's going to call their ass out, right? He's going to use his own platform. And I think he even went as far to say he's going to use some of the connections he's
at
built
ESPN,
in the media. Yeah, which is very interesting. That's a whole nother topic for another day. That broke, I think, today and yesterday, I think, if I'm not mistaken. A bunch of ESPN on-air personalities have been let go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty crazy out there. So he may not have a whole lot of connections left after the weekend, man. By the time the season starts, but I love it. I mean, here's the thing, dude. He's leveraging his fame and he's leveraging his self pretty much to keep his players in house.
Yep.
Man, and he's building something at UAB. I get it, man. To me, this is. I know the reaction a lot of people are going to have with it because on one hand you look at it, you say, who wants to steal players from UAB, right? Like I know a lot of coaches and a lot of fans are probably looking at this and they say, man, nobody wants to go to UAB and get your fucking players, dude. Get out of here with that. But I want you to think about this. We've covered a lot of people, a lot of different teams on this show, and I feel like just about every week or every other week we're covering a team that has picked up a USF player, right? University of South Florida player, right? A team that went 1-11 last year, right? And a good bit of their roster is at other Power 5 schools, and some are expected to compete for serious playing time and starting roles, which is insane. So you don't know. It's college football, and to me, this is a great move by Trent Dilfer. I love that he did this.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. People are going to look at this and go, who the fuck's Trent Dilfer? Who the fuck is UAB? Nobody cares, right?
Yeah.
Who would want a UAB player? But, dude, there's great players at smaller schools. You see it all the time. Look at the NFL. Look at the Pro Bowl last year, for example, where a lot of these guys went to college and played for. They're not high. Not everyone's a high-profile Power 5 conference school. They're just not. There's great players all over the place. I mean, we could go down the long road. So it doesn't mean that there's not good kids there. I like his attitude. I like the fact that he's going to stand up for his guys, his school, his program, and his fan base, man. I mean, I have no problem with it, dude. I'm more interested to see, will he actually call people out when it does happen? That's where I'm at.
I think he will. I definitely think he will, dude. I mean, if you're already doing that now, what's stopping you from saying, hey, I got the receipts. I mean, think about this. If it happened at Colorado, Dion would do that in a heartbeat.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So,
yeah.
Welcome to the new era of college football, by the way.
Yeah, no shit. It's changed a lot, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that being said, Chris, let's segue into the next segment here, the Wisconsin Badgers. This is somebody you're a Nebraska fan. Obviously, you're a huge Big Ten fan. You've followed probably Wisconsin pretty well over the years. You know a lot about him. What are your thoughts on Wisconsin this year?
I'll run through what I got here and just a little research I did as well, which I didn't need to do much on Wisconsin, Christian. Obviously, just because, like I said, Barry Alvarez. Anybody knows I'm a Husker fan. Barry Alvarez played in Nebraska. He ended up going to that program, I think, in the 80s, ends up being their coach and then an AD there. So he basically, I don't want to say he stole our blueprint, but he really replicated what Nebraska did back in the 90s and early 2000s. Now he's been doing that there when he was there, with Wisconsin. And Christian, is it any surprise every year that Wisconsin has a 1,000-yard rusher?
No, it is not.
I mean, I mean, it's just like getting up in the morning. I mean, it's going to happen. So, here's the thing with Wisconsin and where I'm at this year. I think last year they finished around 7-6. I believe they were 4-5. Very down year for Wisconsin, and I'm sure their fan base. Paul Chryst was fired. I believe it was his fifth or sixth game of the season. He got canned. I blame that on Graham Mertz. That's a story for another day. You guys, if you don't pay attention, watch my last podcast, what I had to say about Graham Mertz. Here's the other thing. I think they finished, I don't know, right around 80th, 77, something in there on offense last year. We know they want to run the ball. Braylon Allen is a hell of a running back, by the way. I think he is my number. I moved him up my list, Christian. I think I got him like third now overall best running back in the country right now. I like him a lot. He's a damn good running back if you haven't seen him play. But that is no surprise, right? I mean, everybody knows this about Wisconsin. We could name the list of great running backs: Jonathan Taylor, Ron Dane, Melvin Gordon. We could go down the list. James White. I mean, my God, they've had tons of good running backs there. So that's running back you. They're going to run the football. But here's the big thing this year: they did get a new offensive coordinator. They also have a brand new quarterback too, I believe, from SMU, and I think he's thrown like 70 fucking touchdowns. in the last 2 seasons at SMU. I mean, was it Tanner Mordecai? That's his name, right, Christian? I believe I'm right about that. I don't think they're going to go air raid in Wisconsin. That would be really, but just changing it 180 there. I don't think they're going to do that. But their offense is going to look better this year. It has to, right? We know the defense is good. I believe they finished top 20 last year in defense. Wisconsin always has solid defense. Trust me. I mean, it's nothing. Nothing should change over there on that end of it. The big thing though is the passing offense. I believe they finished 115th or something like that last year on offense. That's atrocious. I mean, that's not going to get it done out of 133 teams, especially in the Big Ten. You know, I think Christian and I, we have this debate. We know that the SEC is the best conference. I think the Big Ten is the second best conference. You're going to have to come to play in the Big Ten every week. And Wisconsin is going to have to move the ball on offense, guys. So I think we all fucking know that. I think it's pretty straightforward. So it'll be interesting this year to see what they do on the offensive side of the ball. I think they're still going to pound the ball with Braylon Allen a lot. And Tanner Mordecai, I think, is going to be a better quarterback by default than Graham Mertz was last year. I hopefully that's not a bold take, but Graham Mertz to me was a overrated trash can out there his couple years at Wisconsin. So the other thing is, too, I think they add a couple players. Christian, as you know, you'll probably get into the names, but I know they added a few guys at wide receiver through the transfer portal. That'll be big. So I think their passing offense is definitely going to be better this year. So it'll be interesting to see. So we'll get into predictions here at the end. I kind of want to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure you're going to rattle off some crazy stats about Wisconsin players like you always do. But I am high on Wisconsin this year as far as somebody's got to lead the West, right? I am a Nebraska fan. I think anybody that watches the show knows that. This isn't a Nebraska show, though. But I think Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa are probably the 3 best teams in the West this year. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very high. And the big thing, I didn't even bring it up yet, guys. Everybody knows I'm a big Luke Fickell fan. I was waiting to the end to bring him up. I think he was a great hire for Wisconsin. He played at Ohio State. He's coached at Ohio State. He went to Cincinnati. Brought him to the playoff. Man, I love Luke Fickell. I think he's a really good head coach, Christian. I think he's going to do good things at Wisconsin. I think that's a perfect program for him and what he wants to implement there this year. I'll kick it over to you here.
Yeah, I think you said it exactly right. He's going to do some great things at Wisconsin. It's going to take him some time, though, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. He's not inheriting a bad team or anything.
No.
But the part of it that, to me, is kind of, I would just say a little concerning is, like you said, offensively, they're very one-dimensional. They're kind of like Iowa in the fact that they have a shit ton of really good offensive linemen every year. They play really good defense, and they run the ball down your throats. I mean, they always have 2 or 3 really good running backs, and it's just a pipeline to the NFL, right? The problem is you need, in this day and age of college football, if you want to compete outside of the Big Ten West and you actually want to compete for national relevance, you have to be able to throw the ball and be prolific. They go out and they get a kid that, at SMU, Tanner Mordecai, you kind of touched on him, right? Who threw 70-plus touchdowns while he was at SMU, lower level of competition. He's jumping all the way up to the Big Ten, which is going to be a much, much harder defensive competition there, right? But before I get into Mordecai, I kind of want to circle back a little bit. Yeah, I love the Luke Fickell hire. I think he was one of the best options available out there. It's a good fit all the way through. Wisconsin, they're coming off a 7-6 campaign, while Fickell, he went 9-3 last year at Cincinnati. I mean, that's a pretty damn good job, I would say. He even got Cincinnati to the playoffs a couple years ago, so that's pretty good. Here's the thing that concerns me, though, about this offense, Chris. Mordecai, in the spring game, he threw 4 interceptions in that spring. And 3 of those were on back-to-back-to-back drives. I think you said by default he's going to be better than Graham Mertz. I think he might actually, by the end of this year, this might sound crazy, but by the end of this year, I think Wisconsin fans might actually miss Graham Mertz.
Woo! I got a different take than you do on this one. But go ahead.
Well, I understand they've got a really good defense. But when you throw 4 interceptions in a spring game, dude, I mean, you're supposed to be this prolific quarterback, all this stuff. And I know people are going to come in, they're going to chime in and say, well, the offensive line wasn't all the way there, or the wide receivers weren't there, that he's going to be throwing to, and this, that, the other. Look, I don't give a shit about all that, all right? There was accuracy issues that I saw. The timing looked off. It's unacceptable, right? I mean, it's kind of unacceptable. It's a spring game. You're not going to get hit. Take a sack. Move on. So that's the bad side. The good side is, I think the offense, they're going to have to run this offense through Braylon Allen this year. I mean, he put up 1,300 yards last year, 11 touchdowns. So that's pretty good. The passing game, I think as far as the passing game is concerned, they're going to take a step forward, right? They bring back their leading receiver in Chamir Dyke. He had 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. They also bring in former 4-star wide receiver from USC, C.J. Williams, and Cincinnati transfer Will Pauling to help kind of bolster that room a little bit. So that's good. They bring in some talent. I think they'll be better in that area for sure, right? The offensive line, that was a huge question mark, I feel like, for the last couple of years for them as far as pass protection. They should be much better this season, as long as they can stay healthy. Of course, they trotted out 8 different starting combinations of linemen last year. And that's, again, it doesn't maybe sound like a crazy enough stat, but 8 different combinations of starting offensive linemen. That's fucking insane. Mordecai's success depends on it. That's my take on the offense. If they can stay healthy, protect him up front, that wide receiver room can get something going, and Mordecai can lock in and not struggle with accuracy, they got a good shot. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add, because me and you are going to have a little bit different take on as far as the offense goes. I think that you're not wrong. He looked like complete dog shit in that spring game. I watched some of that game, and he did look really bad. I will say that. But I will say, as I always say, it is a spring game. He is a new quarterback in that system. They did get an OC. I'm not trying to make excuses here, Christian. I'm not. He will be better, mark my words, than fucking Graham Mertz, though. I will promise you that. I don't. Graham Mertz has done nothing for Wisconsin the past 2 years when he was there. He didn't. I mean, he got their head coach fired. They went 4 or 5 in the West last year, Christian. 4 and 5. I think Wisconsin's going to be a hell of a lot better this year than 4 and 5 in the West.
I'm trying to say, let me ask you this then. Graham Mertz, just out of curiosity, if Graham Mertz went from Wisconsin instead of going to Florida, right, going to arguably a harder conference, which I think was a terrible move for him, by the way. I get the move on his part, but I think it's a bad move from 10,000 feet looking in. But what if Graham Mertz transferred to SMU? You're trying to tell me he couldn't? If Graham Mertz wasn't at SMU this whole time, he couldn't put up similar stats to Tanner Mordecai? You don't think he can do that? I don't think the kid can throw football. I don't think he's that good. I really don't. Man. Graham Mertz, I thought, was one of the worst pickups in the transfer portal that you could have picked up. I don't think he could play. Yeah. Well, they said that about Adrian Martinez, too, there for a while. I really was never sold on Adrian Martinez either, though. I'm just saying, dude. I'm not saying he lit the world on fire at K-State, but I'm saying he looked better at K-State. Yeah. He also went to a weaker division, though, too, or a conference. I mean, no offense, but would SMU not be a weaker conference? No, agreed. I'm not saying Graham Mertz wouldn't look terrible at SMU, but I'm also saying I think this kid is a better quarterback than Graham Mertz. I truly, truly do. I'm not sitting here and act like I studied, for 24 hours of watching tape on both of them, but I've watched plenty of Graham Mertz, and I've seen a little bit of Tanner Mordecai. And don't get me wrong, SMU slings the ball all over the fucking field in a conference where there is absolutely no defense. I agree. But I think under a new OC, and I think they're going to rely very, very heavily on Braylon Allen. I really do. I mean, I think we know that. But you're right. Yeah, the offensive line pass blocking's got to be better. And if you got to take a sack, you got to take a sack. I mean, I'm just not going to put everything on that spring game. I think Wisconsin, we'll get in our record predictions here. I'll leave it at that. I'm very high on Wisconsin as far as the Big Ten goes this year, though. I will say that. Yeah, I won't put everything on the spring game either. I mean, again, I know obviously you can't really gain everything from one game, especially a spring game, but I take a lot from spring games, right? I know if I'm looking at teams, like if we're throwing 4 interceptions and you're supposed to be the starter, chances are the offense is probably not. The passing offense might struggle at times this year because there's only maybe 4 or 5 months from the spring game to get that much better. I agree. I agree with that that portion of it. Absolutely. Yeah. No, they'll be better on offense. Mark my words on this one. Trust me. All right. Like I said, we'll put a bet on it. We'll circle back to it. We'll put a bet on it. Okay. All right, so the defense, right? The defense should be good this year. I will say that. The defenses should be really good this year. I mean, you touched on it. Every year it seems as if Wisconsin finishes in the top 15 for defenses in college football, right? Luke Fickell also had Cincinnati playing really good defense too. He even had the likes of Sauce Gardner and Myjai Sanders, who look pretty damn good, and they look, especially Sauce Gardner looks pretty poised for some success in the NFL, dude.
He's one of the top 3 corners in the NFL right now
already, and he was a rookie last year.
Yeah,
so
it's fucking crazy.
Myjai Sanders, I think he's got some good opportunities at Arizona, so it'll be pretty interesting to see kind of what happens there. They get back a lot of their linebackers from last year.
I believe they return 8 starters, right? Off that team, off the defense.
They return a lot of people, especially in that front 7. So that's pretty damn good. But the big thing is they lose out on Nick Herbig, right? Who had 11 sacks last year. That's kind of probably going to hurt him a little bit. But they bring back C.J. Goetz and Mema Injong Meta. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. Right. So that's certainly going to help. I think Mema, he ended up leading the team last year in tackles, so that's pretty damn good too. So most of the D-line are back from last year. You know how I feel about getting most of your front 7 back. I think that's important. You can take a big step forward when you do that. Secondary, they're going to be led by, the safety, Kamoy Latu, right? But they're going to have to see the corners step up here in a big way this year. As of right now, they've got Boston College transfer Jason Maitre, who played decent, but he's going to end up being their nickel back for him. Ricardo Holman and Alexander Smith both played sparingly last year, but they look really promising, and I think, both corner spots will be in pretty good hands with them. Right? So,
and don't they have a new defense coordinator too? Is it Mike Tressel? Is that who it is?
Yeah, it's Mike Tressel. I think it's Jim Tressel's nephew.
Right.
So a lot of Ohio State connections here on this team.
Yeah, no shit. No shit.
A lot of Ohio State connections.
Yeah, no, their defense will be solid again this year. Just the big thing, the corners. Teams aren't going to be able to run the football in Wisconsin. You're going to have to throw it, and that's where I think that's where that secondary is going to be huge this year if they can step up. But there is, without a doubt in my mind, Wisconsin will be in the top 20 in defense at the end of the year. You usually just check that off the box.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Chris, with that being said, you ready to jump into some record predictions here, bud?
Yeah, let's go, baby. Let's go.
All right. I'll let you start us off here. What do you think, Chris, as far as what do you think?
Here's the deal. Like I said, I'm pretty high on Wisconsin this year, guys. I think a lot of it has to do with Luke Fickell. I do know it's his first year, new quarterback, new OC, new defensive coordinator as well. So a lot of new pieces there at Wisconsin. But Buffalo, Washington State, not worried. Georgia Southern. If you're Nebraska, you got to be worried about Georgia Southern of last year. But Purdue, not worried. Rutgers, no. So they're going to start the season off 5-0. Here's the big one, Iowa. But they got them at home. This game is a toss-up. I've been saying this all year. I was just having this conversation the other day about the Big Ten West. It's going to come down to Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska. I think who wins that, right? I said that to start off the show. I could see a loss at Iowa. I really could. I think Iowa will be better this year. Their offense cannot be any fucking worse than it was last year. But I'll finish up with my record here in a second. But Illinois, then there's the Ohio State game, right? Luke Fickell's alma mater. I mean, that's a big game. But Ohio State, they're going to win that one. Indiana, Northwestern. I actually think Nebraska's going to play them tough this year. It's usually a really good game every freaking year. Minnesota. I have Wisconsin pegged at 9 wins, Christian. That's what I got this year. I got a 9-3. I think that Iowa-Nebraska game, if they beat them, then they're looking at a 11-1 season, only lost to Ohio State. Could that happen? Absolutely. Does it happen? I don't think so this year. I think they're going to lose to Iowa. I think they're going to lose to Nebraska. And I think they're going to lose to Ohio State. Now, is there really any other team on that schedule that would beat them? In my opinion, no. I don't. I don't think Minnesota is a better football program than Wisconsin. I don't think we all know about Northwestern, Indiana. Not worried about Illinois. Will have a really good defense again. They are a little sneaky, by the way. We haven't touched on them a lot this year when we're talking Big Ten. But Purdue, definitely not worried about them. Washington State, that non-con schedule, nothing there for Wisconsin. So they're gonna have a way better year this year. I could see them winning the West, dude. I actually have, spoiler alert for me, coming down to Nebraska and Wisconsin. So I think that second to last game of the season is going to come down to who wins the West this year, possibly.
Man, we're not too far apart here. I've got them 8-4. I'll say 8-4, and then I'll kind of get into realistic and best case scenarios, kind of like you did. I got losses to Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Minnesota. I think you play Minnesota early in the year. You guys luck out because you play them first game of the year. Yep. I think that favors you. Late in the year, playing Minnesota, they can do some weird shit. And they can do weird shit at any point of the year. That's the crazy part about them. So, I mean, for me, I got 8-4 with losses to Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Minnesota. I'm going to throw this in here too, Chris. Don't count out Georgia Southern, right? Georgia Southern, I know what a lot of people think. We had the same conversation last year with Nebraska, right? They shocked Nebraska. I know, obviously, that was a whole different situation. I know we talked about Nebraska as far as the Scott Frost era, lack of preparation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I know Luke Fickell is going to have them prepared and everything like that. Clay Helton's building something sneaky down there at Georgia Southern. If you look past it, you might be in for a shock.
So do you look past Washington State? If I'm not mistaken, Washington State beat Wisconsin last year, I think. If I'm not mistaken, you look past them too then?
Well, no. I mean, I'm not saying that at all. I mean, again, Buffalo, let's just say that's an easy win. If you go into a tight game against Washington State, you get banged up at certain positions. I mean, who knows? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just looking at this from the standpoint of how the offense to me is the biggest question mark, right? I mean, so let's say Georgia Southern gives them fits and they can figure out a way to get past that defense and then start lighting them up. And then they got to start throwing the ball, and then Tanner Mordecai has an off day, and he looks like he did in the spring game. You trying to tell me right then and there they couldn't lose?
Well, we could say that about a lot of teams, though. I just don't see a chance in hell because I don't think Georgia Southern is going to be able to run the football at all against Wisconsin. Therefore, you become one-dimensional, and Wisconsin's just too good a defense. I just don't see a loss for Wisconsin at all in the first 5 games at all. I think that, like I said, I think there's like a tier level in the Big Ten, which is amazing. I'm saying it's the Big Ten West, which is obviously the little sister of the big brother over there of the East. But I think it's Iowa, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. Those 3, I think, are just going to be – I think Illinois is a scarier game than Minnesota, personally. That's just me. I am a little worried about Minnesota playing Nebraska, as you mentioned, off week 1. But I think Wisconsin's going to be really good. And a lot of this, to me, Christian, maybe I'm a little biased – I just think Luke Fickell's a hell of a coach. I think he's going to have those guys ready to play, and that's where I just don't see him having a 7-5 year, or really even an 8-4. To be honest with you, I see them at 9 wins or more this year. I'm going to sign my name on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bias there. Hey, that's okay though. We all have a little bias. I know I do too. My thing is, I have them 8-4, right? That's where I've got them pegged at. I'm just going through the worst case scenario here, and I'm just talking about Georgia Southern because this is a team that I know we've touched on in the past. Yeah. Not on the show, but just in passing. They're a dangerous team, right?
They are.
I mean, so depending on how you come into that game, they can light you up, and it might be surprising, right? Especially if that, you got to think about this too, right, Chris? I mean, let's go back and let's think about how Iowa looked last year. I know we're comparing 2 different teams, right? But they're very similar in their play style. Iowa had a couple of FCF schools, if I'm not mistaken, in the first couple of weeks, and that was really a nail-biting football for them, right? So I'm just saying, if the offense struggles to find continuity this year, it could be, again, it could be some interesting games there in the early slate for them, in the non-con.
Yeah, and I see a scenario for that maybe. But then again, Brandon mentioned Iowa. If Nebraska didn't knock them off last game of the year, Iowa was playing for the Big Ten title. So, I mean, there's a – I just see a path for Wisconsin being way better than 7-5. I think you can pencil them for 8 or 9 wins every single year. And I actually think more this year just with the strength of schedule this year. And I just don't – I think Minnesota's going to be down from last year. You got no Mo Ibrahim. I think Illinois is going to be down. They lost some players. I just don't see – you're right about the non-con. Yeah, Washington State could beat them up a little bit. They will throw the ball all over the field type of thing. But I just don't see how. I mean, Georgia Southern, this is a different team, them coming back this year than what they were last year. Trust me, I got very well educated last year on Georgia Southern after the ass whooping they laid on Nebraska on that night game. So that's what got Scott fired the next day. But, I don't have much more to add, I guess, to Wisconsin. We're a little different this year. That's fine. That makes the world go around. I love it that you got a different take than I do on them. But I'm relatively high on Wisconsin. I actually have them winning the Big Ten East, or excuse me, Big Ten East. Is it West this year? Sorry,
yeah.
Can't get my words out.
Yeah, I'll say this, and then we'll kind of pause for just a second here. But look, dude, I want to say this. If you're a Wisconsin fan listening and saying, "Oh, that guy in the left over here is being a hater," I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm just trying to be realistic and kind of do I do this with every team, right? I get my realistic take on it.
No, I want you to piss off some Wisconsin people because I've already pissed off all the fucking Florida people.
Auburn
trust me. Auburn and Florida people hate me.
Fucking swamp people do not like us. But if the offense is good, right, and it's consistent, and the defense plays up to the way we know they can, I think they got a good shot, dude. I mean, they got a good shot at making a run for a playoff push. But, that's, again, we got to see it, right? So we haven't seen that necessarily, especially on the offensive side of the ball, in the passing game in the last couple years. So.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to kind of pause right here, and we'll kind of look at Daniel, longtime subscriber of the show here.
Hell yeah.
He says they're going to beat Buffalo, Georgia Southern, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue. After that, he can't see another obvious win. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5, 6 wins right there, dude.
I'm disappointed, Daniel. I'm disappointed, buddy. I know you're a Washington guy, but Wisconsin, 9 wins this year.
He's
Write it
riding
down.
hard with it.
He is.
riding
No,
hard
I
with
love
the
it. I
Washington
love it,
State.
though.
I like it. I know he's a Washington fan, but hey, it's pretty damn good. I agree with him. I think they may be in for a tougher season with Chris believes, by the way.
All right.
Chris is going Chris is senile over there, right? Keep that in mind. He's old as shit.
Yeah. I you know what, man? I think you guys are crazy writing off Wisconsin, man. I think you guys are. I really am. I do. I think that I think you guys are going to be kind of surprised when they start the season off 5-6-0 and play the Ohio State game, and then it's on College Game Day because they're both undefeated up to that point. So we'll see, though. Good thing about this, we're going to find out. So
100%. All right, Chris. We got a new segment we're going to unveil tonight for you guys.
Oh boy.
A little Hunt's hot seat. Right?
Yeah.
The first up on the hot seat here, Jimbo Fisher. I don't think there's anybody in America who's got a bigger spotlight on him right now than Jimbo Fisher. Chris, what do you think about that?
This guy, and I kind of think he's a stooge personally, but this guy got paid a fuck ton of money to go to A&M from Florida State, right? We all know that. Guy makes over like $9 million a year. Has done really nothing with A&M in his time there, Christian. I'm going to be a little hard here and be a hater. Do I think it's the hot seat for him, though? No, I don't. You know why? Because if they fire him after this year, say he goes, Jesus Christ, what'd they go last year? They didn't even make a bowl game.
5-7.
Yeah. They have to pay him out like $77 million. He's got a really crazy contract where, like, the amount of money they invested in this guy, to me, was unreal. We all know he won the national title, Christian, at Florida State with the most guys in prison on that team or felonies I've ever seen in that 2013 Florida State team. My God.
We're just catching up to him, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's a topic for maybe today or another day. Ain't that the truth? That Florida State team, I'm telling you, he won one national title, and they were great. That Florida State team was awesome with Jameis Winston and all those guys. I'm not taking it away. I don't think Jimbo Fisher is a terrible coach, but I don't know if he was worth the money. And I'll be honest with you, that's why I don't think A&M can fire him right now. Like the amount of money they invested, A&M's one of those programs like a Nebraska. They do have a lot of money. They got a lot of boosters, a lot of money coming from those oil fields. They got a lot of money over there, so they can afford to pay people. But my thing is with Jimbo, they got to get it together. Yeah. This is the SEC over here. When A&M moved over there, I thought, boy, you guys are in a different world now. You know what I mean? Coming from the Big 12, Christian, you know this. They haven't been relevant. They really haven't. I think if I'm not mistaken here, his lifetime win-loss record at A&M is like 39-21. If I'm not mistaken, his Florida State record is like 83-23 or something like that. Like if that don't tell you the difference in conferences, I don't know what does, coming from like the ACC over the SEC and the type of talent and the defenses and just great coaches over in the SEC as well. So I just don't. I guess to answer this question, I don't see how they can fire him. Who are you going to go get on that? If you get rid of Jimbo, who are you going to go get while you pay him his $80 million? Like I'm just saying, I think money comes down to this. I don't think that. I don't know. I haven't really dug real deep in A&M's schedule this year, Christian. But if he has a worse year than he did last year, Jesus Christ! Like I think next year then would be his absolute hot seat. That's just my take on this. I'm actually very interested to hear the chats and Christian's and your guys's on this one.
Well, here's the way I look at it, dude. This is his seat is scorching right now after that 5-7 year last year. It doesn't help either that Texas and Oklahoma are coming to the same motherfucking conference next year.
I agree.
It does not help because they're coming over. And what if Texas or Oklahoma ends up coming in and having instant success, right?
And I think one of those two will have some success over in the SEC. I really do, personally. I think it's going to be Texas probably more than it is Oklahoma, but go ahead.
Here's the other side of it too, Chris, right? It's not for lack of talent, because over the last 4 years, the Aggies have actually averaged the 8th best recruiting class in that span.
Did he have the number 1 recruiting class last year?
He not only did he have the number 1 recruiting class, but he arguably had the greatest recruiting class
ever
of all time. Now, I've always said this, and I said this last year when a lot of those kids were going to play, and I said, look, it takes time, especially in this conference, if you're going to put a bunch of 4- and 5-star athletes on the field, and we're going to learn that this year with Bama, but we'll talk about that here in a bit. You can have the most talented roster, but if they're all freshmen, true freshmen that just got done going to prom, and you're coming into the SEC, you're probably going to struggle, right? Now, if you can keep most of them, which he lost also a shit ton of people in the transfer portal this year too, but if you can keep most of them, you've got a good shot to be consistently successful, I think, and that's good. But here's the thing. The reason they brought Jimbo in was to replace Kevin Sumlin. They wanted to get past Bama and start competing for natties, right? I mean, that's essentially why they brought him in over Kevin Sumlin. Because Kevin Sumlin did a good job there.
He did.
He was a bad coach.
No.
He just started to kind of, fade away down the stretch. But the SEC West is probably one of the most, and they're doing away with divisions, but the SEC West throughout this time has been one of the most jam-packed, crowded, hardest divisions to win in all of college football.
I would say it's the hardest division to win. Other than... But go ahead, sorry.
You're exactly right. It's the hardest division to win because you've got Bama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. I mean, you've got, well, maybe not Tennessee's in that side, but you know what I'm saying? You've got a shit ton of people over on that side.
Yeah,
LSU that just make it extremely hard year in and year out to get through them. The way I look at this, Chris, very simply is, with all that talent, if I could tell you this right now, all that talent, Jimbo hasn't been able to get 10 wins since he's got to Texas A&M. Can you believe that?
You touched on it, and this is my take here on this with this. I'm glad you brought that up, Christian. I appreciate that. Here's my thing. Is this just an outlier year last year for him? Was it an outlier year, right? We see coaches do that, good coaches, and I think you would agree Jimbo Fisher is not a scrub for a coach. I think he's kind of a stooge as far as his personality goes at times in media. But was it just an outlier last year? Was it a down year? If I'm not mistaken, he had kind of a year like that at Florida State back in the day too, I think. Something like that, maybe where he didn't make a bowl game or they won 6 games or Jesus Christ, no, I'm completely wrong. That's impressive. Here's my thing, though. He did move over to the SEC, and that was where I was getting at with this, is that the SEC is a hell of a lot tougher. I mean, let's be honest. That West Side's brutal. It's almost like the Big Ten West, right? Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. Last few years, like, Penn State, if they were on the other fucking side, man, they're probably thinking that too. Hell, we'd beat the hell out of Wisconsin. We'd beat the hell out of Iowa every year. We'd beat the hell out of Nebraska, right? So that's where I think some of this is the conference. And some of it is, I don't know. I can't figure this guy out. Is it a one-year wonder that he won it at Florida State, Christian? Was it just one of those gifted years where you get it done You know, like, was he too overrated as a head coach? I guess is my question.
No, I think honestly what it was is he had really good offensive line play. He had excellent
That team was
receivers.
loaded.
Yeah,
Loaded.
but primarily he had a phenomenal quarterback in Jameis Winston, right? That's part of it that could extend plays and make things happen. And then after that, after Jameis left, I mean, I just don't think the quarterbacks they had after that were, I mean, they were talented, but they just never were able to really put it all together or stay healthy. And that really cost him and that hurt him. And so, at A&M, I mean, he had Kellen Mond and now they've cycled in and out of 4- and 5-star quarterbacks that are perennial all-stars or whatever have you, but they're not even on the roster. I mean, to me, this is what it ultimately comes down to, though. The quarterback this year. Who's going to be the quarterback? I mean, it looks like Connor Weigman, right?
Yeah.
But Max Johnson's battling it out too. I mean, Weigman's a former 5-star, quarterback, and he was a true freshman last year. But he threw, he threw 8 touchdowns and no interceptions, but he struggled with keeping the offense going, right? And getting in that rhythm. Max Johnson, on the other hand, has been around college football for a while. Here's a hot take for you, Chris, inside of this hot seat segment. I could see Max Johnson having a Stetson Bennett / Max Dugan-like year this year.
Really?
Right? Where maybe Weigman starts the season off as the starter, he wins the job. Maybe he doesn't stay healthy in the beginning of the season. I don't want to wish that on him, or doesn't play well, right? And then out of nowhere, Max Johnson comes out and leads the Aggies to greatness. I could see it. I'm just saying, man, I could definitely see it. What greatness is, I don't know. Maybe it's an upset win over Alabama. Maybe it's, maybe it happens early in the year and he gets them on this improbable run and they make it all the way to the SEC championship. You never know. And they're talented enough on that roster to surprise the shit out of everybody.
That's what this comes down to, though, to me, with Jimbo. And that's where I have a question mark about. I think that he's a good coach. He's a damn good recruiter. He's a tremendous recruiter. That's part of. It's probably 80% or 70% of coaching. I think most people with half a fucking brain would agree with that in the college landscape nowadays. But can he coach these guys? And that's what's surprising. I don't know. I think this is a very interesting year for A&M. If they have another down year, and I mean down is like not winning a bowl game, I would assume they say, hey, I mean, he's already been there for 5 years. I know it's the SEC. I don't think they have that like crazy good year this year just with their schedule. And I don't know, man. If I'm A&M right now, I am worried. You got a ton of talent on your roster. You don't get it done for the second year in a row. And what I mean by not getting it done is win 8 or 9 games, especially in the SEC. That's not a bad year if you get 9 wins. Let's be honest.
No.
I don't know, man. I think that the seat is hot. I agree. I think they're kind of fucked though, because it's like, well, I don't want to pay this guy $77 million either.
Yeah,
maybe it ain't a big deal. Maybe I'm wrong, but a lot of schools can't afford that.
Well, you got to think about it from this standpoint. I mean, Texas A&M over the last probably decade, I would say, has probably been the hottest draw in the state of Texas. I mean,
100%.
TCU last year had a good run, but they've been consistently. TCU has money, and let me tell you right now, if they want Jimbo gone, they'll get him out of there. They'll figure out a way to do it. They may break it down and pay him in loan installments or whatever have you, right? Pay him $7 million a year for the next 10 years. They'll figure out a way to get him gone. I think it comes down to this, Chris. Anything less than 7 wins this year, I think he's out.
Yeah, I mean, I could see if less than 7 wins, Christian, yeah. With a lot of it then, if that is the case, say that happens, right? Yeah. We're speaking hypothetically here, but like if it does happen, does all that talent leave then? If it does stay, my God, you could plug and play any coach in there at that point. You know what I mean? I mean, that roster is fucking loaded. I mean, with 5 stars and 4 stars all over the place. I mean, when you have like arguably the greatest recruiting class ever last year, and you win 5 freaking games, I mean that's tough. I mean, those kids are got to be thinking after this year, well, shit, this Jimbo guy can't coach. You know what I mean? He can recruit whatever they sold him on. Maybe the NIL money, we could figure in a bunch of different scenarios here, Christian. But, like, yeah, you're right. I mean, if he doesn't, you're probably right. I mean, God, that's a lot of money to me to pay a guy who won one national title on a team that had a lot of problems outside of football. You know, his record, I never, I'll be honest with you, Christian, maybe this is a different take. I can't believe he ever left Florida State to begin with. He was really good there. They were actually prominent for the first time in 15 years, you know, when they won that title.
Well, he was coming off in 2017. I think he saw the writing on the wall. He went 5-6.
Yeah, I take that back. That's right. That was the one outlier year I was talking about, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall. I just, you know, I'm not saying they couldn't have rebounded from it. I mean, Jimbo's a hell of a recruiter, right? But I just think that, man, it was a tough thing. A&M was offering him stupid money. I think you got to go for it. You got to do it. But yeah, man, I mean, this is going to be an interesting thing to see this year. I'm actually really interested to see how A&M plays this year, right? They're kind of that wild card team. I feel like that they could have a really good year. They could make it past Bama and hell, maybe even surprise all of us and beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. They've got that talented of a roster, I feel as if.
It's either, I think one or two things happens. Either that happens or they flop again. You know what I mean? Like I don't think there's really any in between here. And I don't think I don't know a ton of A&M people, but I would assume their fan base is probably like, holy fuck, we're paying. The only reason why I say this is because we paid Scott Frost a lot of money, right? And I know what that feels like. If you're going to give me 4 or 5 fucking wins a season, if Scott never even got us 5, get this fucking clown out of here. You know what I mean? Like that's. Yeah. I think A&M's thinking the same thing. They know they're in the SEC. They understand that conference is tough, but they also made the choice to go over there and compete. And I think when they did go over there, when A&M, if you guys don't remember, when A&M went over there, A&M was the hottest team in Texas by far. By far. They own the recruiting down there. If anybody knows about anything about college football, Texas is a hotbed for talent, obviously. And they were getting pretty much everybody and anybody they wanted.
Yeah.
So it didn't play out the way they thought it was going to. Now they're like, well, fuck, we're paying this guy a boatload of money, and we got a 5-win season, no bowl game, no nothing to hang your hat on. They're in panic mode. I get it. If I were an A&M fan, hell, I'm not even an A&M fan, but I get it as an A&M just watching A&M. I'm like, Jesus, these guys should be a hell of a lot better, Christian.
You know, coronary artery.
Yeah.
Talk about a heart attack team, man. Mm-hmm. Chris, with that being said, I'm excited. This is the segment I'm probably most excited about today.
I know where we're going here.
Who do you have? You know, what we wanted to do with this, by the way, I want to kind of preface it just like this. With next year, with the playoffs expanding to 12 teams, I want to see who do we think this year are the 12 best teams in college football that could, at the end of the year, be in the playoffs. You know, again, if it was that format, obviously. So, Chris, with that being said, who you got?
All right, I'm going to work backwards here, Christian, if you're cool with that.
Cool.
Okay. My 12 teams, I'm not going to break them down. I think we'll have a debate here after I'll just run through my list of top 12 teams here at the end. I got Texas Longhorns at 12, Christian. I got the Washington Huskies at 11 this year. We know, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm putting 3 Pac-12 teams in the top 12. This might be a first for me. I'm a big-time Pac-12 hater, as everybody keeps dubbing me. I got Alabama at 10. Yeah, I know. Pissing off those Bama people. I got a surprise team here, and probably a lot of people are sleeping on these guys. I got Clemson at 9. Okay? You got that wrote down, Christian? I hope you do.
Oh, I'm writing it down, by God.
8. I got the Oregon Ducks. That one's probably a little bit higher than most people would like this year, but I'm pretty high. 7, Penn State. I think Penn State is a damn good football team. Like I said, we'll dig into the teams here after Christian lays his out here. Number 6, I got the LSU Tigers. Now, this is where it gets tricky, right? I mean, I know this is a 12-teamer, but for this year, there's actually only 4, obviously, as we know. This one was tough for me. I have the Ohio State Buckeyes and Ohio State Buckeye time. I'm not saying I can't stand when they do that. But I got the Ohio State Buckeyes at 5, Christian. All right, here's my top 4. This will be my predictions if this year, obviously, like I just said, we got a 14 playoff. I have the USC Trojans. I had to really think about this. I don't like Caleb Williams as a personality, but man, he's back. I think Lincoln Riley, he's going to get him there this year. USC should be really good this year. Here's my big one at 3. This is where I get a little weird this year. Christian will definitely not have this team in there. I got the Florida State Seminoles and Jordan Travis at 3, baby. Got to make it fun. Number 2, pretty straightforward. We got the Wolverines there at 2. Number 1, I hate to say it, stroke your ego, Georgia Bulldogs. I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. It's, follows college football this year. Georgia has a damn good chance to three-peat, which I can't believe I'm even saying that word. But with their schedule, their coach and the players, some of the players they're returning there, that's why they're there. Christian, I want to hear yours, and then I want to kind of debate, hopefully, on some of these teams.
All right. I love it. I like it. I want some more of it. Let's take a look here. Chris, here's what I got, dude. Here's what I got for you. I'm gonna do mine the same way. All right, so I'm going to go backwards for you, so make sure you've got a pen and some paper and take some notes.
Well,
okay?
Here's the thing. I'm going to have you send it to me after the thing. So,
well, there we go.
Yep. Or actually, I'll type it in as we go here. Go ahead.
All right, there we go. At number 12, I've got Utah. Number 11, I've got Clemson.
Like it.
Go. Number 10, I've got Notre Dame. The reason why I'm going to put Notre Dame in here and ahead of Clemson is just because, again, I think Clemson is one of those teams where they've got a new quarterback. I can't necessarily pinpoint it and say DJ Uiagalelei was the worst quarterback in the ACC. Yeah, there we go. You know what I'm trying to fucking say. God,
hey, by the way, to interrupt you there, who'd you have after Clemson there? Sorry, I was
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Okay, that's what. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting for Clemson this year. There is a scenario where, they do finish maybe second or third in the ACC.
I'm surprised that you have them up there, not quite as high as I do, but even in the top 12. I like that. It makes me happy.
Absolutely, dude. So, like I said, Clemson and Notre Dame. I think Sam Hartman's going to have Notre Dame inside of the top 10 this year. Number 9, I've got Oregon. So I got Oregon at 9. Okay. Number 8, I've got Tennessee. I think Tennessee with Joe Milton, I think they're going to do some good stuff this year. Okay. They're going to be on the rebound, and it could be really interesting here, right? Number 7, I've got Texas. I think Texas is back. I think they may have some shocking losses this year, right? 1 or 2 losses that might put them outside of the top 5. So be on the lookout for that. Number 6, I've got Ohio State. I think Ohio State, to me, man, they're getting a new quarterback situation figured out. They may have a loss or 2 this year. Puts them at number 6. Number 5. Man, this is... I kind of went back and forth on this, right? Went back and forth on this. Give me LSU.
Wow. Okay. I was surprised there. I'm surprised. I thought you would have them in the Final Four.
I may change my mind on it. There's still plenty of season left here, right?
Where's my Seminoles at? You left them off the top 12, didn't
you? You really think I would do that?
You caught a lot of shit. A lot of shit for the Florida State fan base.
That's one thing I did do. I will not disagree with you on that. I caught a lot of shit for that. Number 4, right? This is where things get really different, Chris, here.
Okay.
All right. Number 4, USC.
Okay. I had them there. At 4, though. Okay.
Number 3, Florida State.
Are you did you copy my list somehow?
Yeah, right? I copied your list. We didn't even talk about it, and I copied your fucking list.
How the hell?
Come on.
Okay.
Number 2, Michigan.
Are you kidding me? This is amazing. Go ahead.
And number 1, the University of Georgia at Athens. Go Dogs.
I'm not kidding, guys. I didn't fucking send him a list. Didn't even talk about it. We just said we are going to do our top 12. That's amazing that you have exactly in the same first 4 in order that I do. That's crazy, man. Christian, do you mind if I start at 12 and talk about my team a little bit and why I put them there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So here's my thing with Texas. I have them at 12 this year. I think a lot of people are high on Texas this year. I think a lot of people are. My thing is I have them finishing 11-2 this year, and that's a damn good record. It really is. They play Bama, I believe, really, really early. I actually think they beat Bama. I truly do. And then most people are going to be like, well, Chris, how the hell do you have Bama over Texas in your top 12? It's because I think they lose to Oklahoma the first game, and then I think they play Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game, and they beat them. So that's kind of where I'm at with Texas this year and kind of where I think it's going to go. Could it happen? Yes. I mean, Texas is very – if Quinn Ewers plays like we think he can, I really, truly believe in Texas this year. I think they probably should be the best team in the Big 12, Christian. Do you have any debates about that? I want to hear your thoughts as I kind of run down my teams, and obviously you're relatively high on Texas as well this year.
No, I think you hit it right on the nail right on the head there. I think Texas is going to be one of the best teams. I've got them a little bit higher. I mean, honestly, like I said, I've got them ranked. You've got them at 12. I got them ranked all the way up to 7.
Okay.
I think, again, I just think that they're going to be one of the best teams in the Big 12 this year.
Okay. Good. Here, this will make Daniel happy, buddy. I know you're a Washington fan. I believe Christian left him off the list. I like Washington this year. I do. I love Michael Penix. I think he's a hell of a quarterback. He's been around the game for a long time. I'm big on that. Pac-12 is kind of loaded as far as quarterbacks go this year. Christian, we all know that. Guys can sling the ball over in that conference. Not a lot of defenses played. But I don't have Washington making the Pac-12 title game this year. That's what's going to kind of hurt them, in my opinion. I think their losses are to USC and Oregon State. I know that sounds crazy. That could definitely change. They also, if I'm not mistaken, got to play Oregon is another game. But I have Washington finishing at 11 this year, Christian. Why did you leave them off the list? That's the question I wanted to ask you.
The reason why I left them off the list is I'm high on Washington. I really like Washington as a team. I don't want to let Daniel down here, but I think they're a top 15 team. I just think that when you've got USC, Oregon, Utah, and Washington, I mean...
So you think Utah finishes above them, right? Because you had them, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you had Utah at 12.
Yeah, I'm really high on Utah. They get a lot of production back. Again, I know we've talked about Washington's defense. They're going to be better this year, but is it enough to be able to jump up the ladder, you know what I mean,
right,
to where you can be the third or second best team in the Pac-12? Because if they're not, and Oregon and USC and Washington, right, kind of do this weird thing where they sort of lose to only each other and they just win out the rest of the way, they would probably, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, well, they could split all those games between a lot of those teams. Like, it could be a really weird, jumbled up fucking mess in the Pac-12 at the top.
Like I just think the fourth best team in the Pac-12, which could be very loaded, misses out on what would be a hypothetical playoff situation.
I agree. Nope, I'll leave it there with your statement. You're exactly right, and that's kind of why I got these guys all kind of jumbled together. This is the first time in a long time I had ever put 3 or 4 Pac-12 teams in a top 12 ever in my life. Pac-12 is going to be good this year. Got a lot of good quarterbacks all returning to those teams. I'm big on that. Okay, so at 10 I have Bama, right? And here's my thing. I have them going 10-2 this year overall. I don't have them making the SEC title game. I don't. The loss to Texas, which doesn't really mean shit as far as that goes. But they got Tennessee at home. They got Texas at home, obviously. They got LSU at home. They got a lot of home games against some really good teams. But I have losses at Texas, and I have a loss at freaking LSU this year. I think LSU is a better team right now than Alabama. You guys have heard me bitch and moan about their fucking spring game. Alabama don't have a fucking quarterback. I can't believe I'm saying that. They led the country in drops as the wide receiver position last year, which is just unreal to me. I know it's a spring game. I know it's not the same year as it was last year. Their defense also gave a boatload, Christian, a boatload of points to a lot of teams in the SEC last year. I am not sold on Bama. I had to, before we started the podcast, I was high on them. The more and more I've read, the more and more I've done research on my boy Nick Saban, who I don't really like personally. I just don't. I don't see how. And don't get me wrong, they make the playoff here, right? If we had a 12-team playoff, that's great. Most teams would die for that.
Yeah.
But Bama being the history that they've had the last 2 decades, I just not as high on them. I think they're gonna have a decent year this year. 10-2 is really good, for most teams. But Bama, I have them at 10. I want to hear your thoughts on Bama a little bit here, Christian. You know them probably better than I do. You're an SEC guy through and through.
A lot of the stuff I keep seeing online, literally the only defense that they have is just Bama's Bama, right?
Exactly.
So that just shows all the bias, right? So eventually, every great empire crumbles and it decays and it gets bad. Now, Saban did have one of the best recruiting classes last year. He's really good at recruiting. He's really good at managing that talent. I just think that they're a really young team this year. They have a lot of question marks at quarterback and on the at wide receiver. The defense has got a lot of holes to kind of fill. The offensive line was suspect last year. They lose Jahmyr Gibbs. It's just a lot. There's too many question marks for me. And again, you got to think Georgia. You've got Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, potentially Ole Miss, right?
Ole Miss can be tough this year.
So let's just say that Bama finishes as the third or fourth. Let's say this is in a hypothetical year, because when we do this, most of every division is going to have eliminated conferences. So, but either way, let's say Bama finishes as the third or fourth best team in the SEC. Yeah, so if they finish at number 4, which I think this year they may be the fourth best team in the SEC with some losses on there, I still think they miss out on the playoffs. I mean, again, are they a top 15, top 25 team? Probably. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most likely, 100% they are.
They would have to fall off the fucking wagon to not be a top 20 team or 15 team this year.
Yeah. But I just think top 12, I would think that there's some other... Like, dude, K-State played them really close last year, right, in that bowl game.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand K-State played a lot of teams really well. They beat TCU, right? But that's the weird part about college football is you just don't know. I mean... Hell, let's be honest. I mean, what if Utah went up against... Utah was a team I had at 12, right? If Utah went up against Bama, who you have at 10, in a hypothetical playoff situation, right? Who's to say Utah couldn't beat them?
I'm not... the way Utah plays football, Bama would have a tough time with them.
Yeah.
Just because of their style of play. Utah's on one outlier in the Pac-12 that I really like. So, yeah, we touched on Bama. Here's my team, and I'm actually surprised you put Clemson. I have Clemson at 9, right? I have 2 losses for the Tigers this year.
Yeah.
Both to Florida State. Florida State in the regular season, Florida State meeting them because they did away with the divisions, playing them in the ACC title game. I think Clemson has a rebound year. Now, I know I'm going to catch some flack for this. I'm not a Dabo Sweeney Dick writer. I'm not, but I really like him as a head coach. I think he's a great recruiter. I know it's been a few years since they've competed for a national title. They won 2 out of 3. I know Deshaun Watson's not there. I know Trevor Lawrence and Travis. I get it, everybody. I get it. But I think that's why I'm high is that they're Florida State. I'm so high on Florida State that I got to put Clemson up here. I don't think the ACC is the end-all, be-all conference. I don't. I think it's Florida State and Clemson up there. I'm big on North Carolina. I just don't know if North Carolina even has a clue how to play defense on that side of the ball, Christian. What's your thoughts on Clemson? I'm very surprised you put them in the top 12 for you as well.
I was thinking about this. To me, I think this year Clemson... And they lose a lot of pieces on the defensive side of the ball. They do that every year, though. They reshuffle, they restock. I mean, they're kind of like Georgia in that way where they're just consistently good. To me, the question's got to be on the offensive side of the ball. I know Cade Klubnik, he's a really highly touted guy. So was DJ. You know what I mean?
Yep.
To me, who's going to step up and be the wide receiver for them? Who's going to step up? And they need 2 or 3 guys that can go out and catch the ball and step up. The offensive line needs to play a lot better. I mean, in the pass protection side of things. I think Clemson is still a top. Again, I'm looking at this from the standpoint of the conference they're in, right? If we dropped Bama this year into the ACC, I would probably have them as the second best team, right? Next to Florida State, honestly.
I would agree.
So, and I think Clemson has a lot of similar things in that regard, right? I just think the second best ACC team, I can't logically put them. I can't put the second best ACC team inside of the top 8 in college football.
I'm not disagreeing with your statement. I guess the reason why, and I'm not backtracking here, but I will say this: the reason why I have Clemson, the QB play is huge, right? If Cade Klubnik plays like anything better than DJ, I know I'm going to catch a lot of slack for that kid. I bagged on him. I didn't think he was as good as his rating was and the 5-star and all that. I'm not saying he's a scrub, but Clemson, I like Dabo. I think he's a winner. He's a player's coach. I'm basically banking on him that they're not going to have, and they didn't have it had a down year compared to Clemson standards last year.
Yeah.
That's what I'll leave that at that. So I'm going to move on here. Who I had at 8 is the Oregon Ducks. And this is, like I said, I could have easily flip-flopped Oregon with Utah or Washington here. I don't know what your boys got going on down there in Oregon. I know you want to talk about it here in a minute. I'm really big on Oregon this year. I've said this. Bo Nix came from Auburn. I like Bo Nix. I think he fits really well over in the Pac-12 and that style of offense and the way they played last year. I have them 11-2 finishing up the season there. I have them, they got Washington away, right? That's a big game. Those 3 big teams over there in the Pac-12 all play each other, basically. You got Utah away. That's going to be a tough game. So I don't like that either. And then you got USC at home, who I'm obviously very high on, so are you, Christian. I have them losing to Washington in the regular season. And then I have them losing to USC in the Pac-12 title game. That's where I put them at 11-2, if anybody's wondering. That's how I came up with that number. Christian, what's your thoughts on the Oregon Ducks? I think you have them, I think, at 10. I have them at 8. What's your reasoning where you have them? And why?
So I had them at 9.
Or 9, sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah, I've got them at 9. So we're not too far apart. My reasoning to put them at 9 is, again, we kind of have to look at this from the standpoint of, like, I guess the way I always do my rankings is kind of like there's the Power 5, but inside of the Power 5, it's probably really SEC. Like, it's SEC heavy for sure. Then Big Ten, then ACC, then I would say maybe it kind of splits between the Pac-12 and the Big 12, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of how I was doing a lot of my ratings, just looking at this from like a realistic standpoint for how I think this year will play out. I think Oregon, they're going to take some steps forward again this year. They were really close last year. I think that they get a lot of pieces back, where Utah gets some pieces back. Washington gets, some pieces back that are really good too, like Penix Jr. and Cam Rising are both really good quarterbacks. But I really like what Dan Lanning does on the defensive side of the ball. I really like how Dan Lanning recruits, and I like what Bo Nix can be in this conference. I just think it's kind of a coin flip, and you could probably interchange any of these teams we've just mentioned in this
100%.
number 8, number 9 spot here. I think Oregon is going to be one of those teams that's going to be, really interesting. I do think USC is a much better team than them, and even if they lose to, let's say they went undefeated, but they lost to Oregon in the Pac-12 championship, there still probably would be, they probably would still be a top 5-6 team.
Right. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. Like I said, the Pac-12 is a really, really big question mark as far as I think the most talented team is USC, obviously, with Caleb Williams returning, and I'll touch on them here in a minute. But Pac-12 is interesting, man. Oregon State's no slouch. You got fucking Washington. We got Utah. We got Oregon. We got USC. I think those teams are all crazy good with prolific offenses. So I'll move on to Penn State. Here's a team that's very, very, very interesting. I don't think gets talked about near enough is Penn State.
Yeah.
I have them at 10-2. Obviously, I don't have them making the Big Ten title game this year because of the Ohio State, Michigan, and the side of the conference they play on. But let's say they beat Ohio State and or they beat a Michigan. Holy shit, you could have basically a 3-way tie over there in the West. Or East, excuse me. I get this conference is screwed up every time, or division is screwed up. Wish they'd just get away with them. Oh, wait, they're going to do that. No, I'm just saying that Penn State is a very interesting team. I think they got the second best running back in the country with Singletary. They're going to be really, really, really good this year. They're getting overlooked a lot just because of the conference and the side that they play in, Christian. I want to hear your thoughts on Penn State. I like Penn State. I think they're a little bit of a question mark at quarterback, but this kid has been very highly touted, talked about a lot over the offseason. Can James Franklin coach? We know he can recruit. I'll leave it at that.
Man, I originally had Penn State at number 9 in that slot where we had Oregon at.
Yeah.
But then, I just remembered, hey, there is Oregon there too. And even if Penn State finishes this year, like they do most years, as the third best team, right, in the Big Ten.
Yep.
do I really think that the third best team in the Big Ten is a top 12 team when now all 12 rankings mean something, right?
Right.
Not saying they didn't mean it before, but I mean, this is going to be really scrutinized, when they start going to this. I just think, I think it'll be very interesting because every year Penn State has a really talented quarterback, right? You can go all the way back to Christian Hackenberg and so on and so on and so on, right? They always have a really talented quarterback, really hyped quarterback, and they just kind of underperform, I feel like. And Drew Aller, to me, I think he can be really good for him, but you look at what James Franklin. Go ahead.
No, I want to interject here a little bit because you don't even have them in your 12, right?
Yeah.
And that surprises the fuck out of me, Christian. I'm gonna teach you a lesson here about some football. Last year, I'll use it for a perfect example.
Yep.
Michigan and Ohio State made the playoff.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. That was only Penn State's losses. You don't think they're a top 12 team when they lost to two of the top 4 best teams in the country?
Is this last year?
No, but I'm saying what happened. Hypothetically, that probably happens this year.
Are they returning the same quarterback from last year?
They don't need to. I actually think this quarterback's going to be better. I think Aller's going to be better.
All right, well.
And you got two stud running backs over there at Penn State, by the way. Everybody sleeps on those guys.
Hey, listen, man. That's what they said about the quarterback before, and the one before him, and the one before him.
What did they finish last year?
Finished third. Or, sorry, technically
what was their ranking?
speaking.
What was their ranking on last year? What did they finish at? They finished what? Top 10? Right?
Okay, I got it right here. They finished 11th last year.
Okay. All right.
They finished
all right,
11th.
all right,
10-2. Listen, I get where you're coming from with it, Chris, because look, just the same way I probably have a little SEC bias, right? You've got a little Big Ten. You got a little Big Ten bias, right? I honestly think that again, and this is what makes it so tough because if you eliminate divisions in the from this, who's to say they're even theoretically speaking, who's to say they would even be now? Last year they would have probably been the third best team eliminating divisions, right? But they were the third best team in the Big Ten East.
Well, okay, yeah, I agree. I guess where I put my foot down here is I think they're by far the third best team in the Big Ten this year.
Oh, well,
Not even close. I don't think Wisconsin, Nebraska, and or Iowa is close. And I don't mean like leaps and bounds. I mean, but Ohio State, Michigan, we all know is way up there.
I guess the reality of the situation is that you can kind of go back and forth with it. You can interpret it a lot of different ways. I mean, I guess if we were going to make that argument, like you just said, we just talked about Wisconsin for, an hour, I mean, pretty much. But I think Wisconsin or Nebraska or Iowa could probably be, up there on that same level if they eliminate divisions, and assuming they play well, right?
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think Penn State's much better than the 3 teams you just mentioned. But good thing about this, we're going to find out.
We're gonna find out.
Here, so number 6, I got the LSU Tigers. I know you're relatively very high on them this year. We've talked about them quite a bit with Jalen Daniels. I'm not going to touch on them too much. I got them going 11-2 at the end of the year. I have them losing the UGA in the SEC title game. I think that's probably going to happen this year. I think LSU is a better team than Alabama this year. Again, I'm not a big Brian Kelly guy, but I do have them. The big thing with me in LSU. And then this is gonna touch on my Florida State, my Florida State team. Yeah. They play week 1. That game they will come back to, Christian, at the end of the year and go, who won that game and who lost that game. I think that's gonna have major implications on those two teams. That's why that game is so huge week 1 of the college football season. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that and or Florida State in that game.
Man, I think you're exactly right. I'm a little higher on LSU. Right, I think LSU. I can see why you put them at 6, but here's the other side of it too, and this is something we haven't even talked about or touched on this, Chris. If LSU loses to Georgia in the SEC championship game and they lose to Florida State,
right,
that would put them as a 2-loss team.
Yep, I have them 11-2.
Okay, so.
But you lost 2 games to 2 teams that are in the Final Four.
Yeah, I mean that is true. Yeah, I mean, that would probably put them – I can see that. Yeah, they're definitely a top 8 team at that point, for sure.
100%.
They're definitely a top –
100%.
I mean, I'm not super far off. I've got them as my number 5 team. Again, I put I've kind of flip-flopped where you were at. You had Ohio State
That's
at
where I'm
5.
at. Yeah.
I have Ohio State at 6. I've got, LSU at 5, Ohio State 6. You've got Ohio State 5, and then LSU at 6.
Right, and that's my thing here, and this is why I'm going to piggyback right off the Ohio State thing. It's tough for me 5 and 6. Like Ohio State, you could flip-flop them in my rankings too if you wanted to, and don't get me wrong. I mean, my rankings don't mean shit, to anybody. But my thing is like Ohio State's going to have one loss this year, and their one loss is going to be to Michigan at the end of the year. So they're not going to be able this year because of the divisions. They're not going to be able to play in the Big Ten title game, right? Which is kind of bullshit because Ohio State, I think, is obviously 1 or 2 in the Big Ten. So how that ties into LSU, it really doesn't. I just think those two teams are really on the outside looking in with USC, who is my number 4. I'm going to jump to them right away since we talked about both those two teams. You made a very good argument on your end. I'm not going to debate you on that. I have USC just because strictly I had to rethink this. I had it switched. I actually had Ohio State in there before them or LSU for a while, flipping back and forth between these 3 teams. I just think USC is going 12-1 this year. They are the most talented team. I'm not a Lincoln Riley guy because he can't coach defense. The loss to Tulane last year fucking just boggled my mind, but this, like you keep telling me, it isn't last year, and you're exactly right. So they're going to have to get better, but you bring back the Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. We know he's a stud. We know he's going to put up fucking amazing numbers. We know USC can recruit. Lincoln Riley can win regular season games and get to this playoff thing every fucking time. I have them at 4. So do you. So we basically are obviously on the same page there, Christian. I have them 12-1. I think they beat Oregon, obviously, in the Pac-12 title game. They do have Notre Dame away. That's an interesting game to early in the year. In the non-cons, they got Utah at home, they got Washington at home, and then they got Oregon on the road. But I just have the one loss this year. I think they're good. They could easily they might run the table over there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I think USC. I think, man, they could shock some people this year, right? Well, they're not going to shock anybody.
I think people aren't going to be shocked if they make the playoff. I think Lincoln Riley doubters like myself, obviously Children of the Corn has the same feeling as I do about him. I just don't know if he can coach fucking defense. I mean, I mean, it just seems like when they need in a big game to play defense against a Utah, who they seem to get their ass kicked by every year, you get beat up by Tulane in a game where USC had 10 times the talent of Tulane. No disrespect to Tulane in that game, but you know where I'm at, Christian.
Well, yeah, and I think I'm on the same wavelength as you too, because it's like I expect the Lincoln Riley Oklahoma special, where they shit the bed one game every year.
Yep,
and that always either costs them, for 1 or 2 games a year, that either costs them the playoffs, or it gets them in there and they're the 4th seed, and then they got to go play Bama or LSU or God only knows who, or Georgia. You know what I mean? So. To me, I just think that, they'll make it to the playoffs this year. I think they may only have 1 loss, maybe 2, and they'll still kind of get, they'll get into that 4th spot there, right, Chris? You touched on Florida State, and I've kind of been. This is the Florida State apology tour for me here, right? I'll tell you this: I think Florida State is legitimately a top 4 team this year. I do think that they will lose to LSU week 1. Okay. I think they'll win the rest of the way out, and they'll end up being number 3.
Okay, so I have them running the table this year. I know that is a crazy bet. I know that is Florida State fans. Hopefully you guys still love me. I've been backing you guys since the start of the season. But I will say, to me, their toughest game is obviously the LSU game. They get by that week 1, as I just stated about LSU. We just talked about that, so I'll be quick with it. Is that I think they're going 13-0 this year. I think they beat the shit out of Clemson. Florida State returns more people, I think, than any other fucking team in America in college football. If Mike Norvell does his thing here, and Jordan Travis, man, I like that kid. I think he's going to have a monster freaking year. I think he will be a finalist for the Heisman. That is kind of where I am putting my foot down with Florida State. Christian, I think you're probably obviously kind of in the same boat as me here, cracking that top 4 as far as this year goes.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I think it's Michigan brings back a quarterback, which I like. I mean, they do. Anytime you bring back a quarterback and you've made it to the playoffs the last 2 years in a row, man, I like that. I think Jim Harbaugh's got Ohio State's number right now. It just looks better for Michigan this year.
Yep.
I think their schedule is pretty favorable too, if I'm not mistaken. So
Right.
I like what Michigan can do. I think they'll probably finish around the 2 or 3 spot. I could probably, you could, and like you said, you could probably flip Michigan and Florida State around a little bit in this rankings, or maybe
Yeah.
USC.
Oh, yeah.
That's the great thing about it. I think these 4 teams will ultimately end up, kind of right where they need to be. So, yeah, let's take a look at this. Then we'll kind of finish it off. We both agree with Georgia, right, Chris?
Yeah. I don't have any. I've listened to you deep throat Georgia this past year. I don't have anything else to add. You guys know my take on Georgia. I don't have much more to say. I know that you're dumb if you're not putting Georgia up here. I mean, Georgia's schedule is very favorable. They're making the playoff unless there is some catastrophic losses to South Carolina and Tennessee in the regular season. I do not see that happening for one. So I'll leave it that with Georgia, Michigan. I'm right there with you. That's really all I got as far as those 2 teams, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this to kind of end it off here with Georgia, right? I'll say this to end everything off with Georgia here,
Okay.
Chris.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
And that is, I think Georgia has a really good shot. Don't worry, Chris will be right back in just a second, by God. I think Georgia has a really good shot at repeating, again, going 3 national championships in a row, which is something that doesn't happen all the time. I mean, historically, it doesn't happen at all. The reason why I say that, Kirby's going to have the defense right. He does it every year. Defensively, they're one of the best teams in the country. You look on offense, they return Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey. They get 2 of the best wide receivers in the SEC to transfer in from a statistical standpoint, so I like that. They bring in a 4-star quarterback in Carson Beck, who's played a little bit at this level, right? He's gotten some experience. Kirby's learned from his mistakes and started to understand, hey, we've got to let this kid play. In the spring game, he was tearing that defense apart. I mean, he was tearing one of the best defenses in college football apart. I just think for me, they're too solid of a team. Most of these players have played big-time football here. And it's just too much for a lot of these other teams. Chris, one of the big things we were kind of talking about too was when you get in these playoffs, right? When you get to the playoffs, do you feel like, hey, the experience part of that really matters? If Bama's not in it, Michigan, Florida State, and USC, for that matter, don't really have the track record of producing in the playoffs, at this era.
I will add to this. If you guys, I don't know if a lot of people watch the NCAA tournament, but you ever notice the last 10, 15, 20 years of basketball, teams with experience in the tournament the year before, the year before that, they go a lot further. There's a big difference. The season starts over when you make the playoffs. I think anybody that's ever played even high school football at a high level knows that. I know I do. You're 0-0 then, right? It starts over. That's where Georgia has this huge advantage. Christian, you just touched on it. They got coaches that have all been through this before. They know what it takes, right? Michigan is yet to win a playoff game. That's, I think, Hardball's biggest question mark this year, Christian. Can he win a playoff game? And I said, when I said bowl game, I meant playoff game, in the Final Four, right? And even, next year when they do go to this 12-team playoff, it's a big thing. Georgia has a huge advantage. They really do in that. They do. USC hasn't been there yet. Florida State hasn't. LSU hasn't been there in a few years. They got a different head coach now. Ed O's not there. I mean, a lot of these teams haven't been there. I mean, Ohio State's the one, but then Ryan Day hasn't gotten it done either when he gets there, Christian. So you're right. That's where Georgia has, and that's why I have them at 1, is because they return a lot of guys. They do every year. They actually, one thing with Georgia, man, it's just like they reload on that other side of the ball. And it's just, it's amazing to watch. It really, truly is. What we're watching right now, if you guys love college football, even if you're a Georgia fan or if you're not, they have a chance to do something that is only happened twice, and that's back in the 40s and the 30s. I can't believe I'm even saying that in today's era of the transfer portal, NIL money, and the way coaches are getting paid, man. It's amazing. I will say that. I'm stroking your ego over there as a Georgia fan. I can't believe I'm doing it. But it's going to be an interesting year in the college landscape of things, especially Georgia. I think everybody's like, damn, they got a chance to do something that really nobody's done in the modern era.
Historic, man. I will say this to kind of end this segment here. the thing about Georgia, and we kind of touched on it, it's kind of both a blessing and a curse at the same time. When you've got that much experience, and you're a junior, senior who you've played in so many awesome, pivotal games that mean something. SEC championship games, games against Bama, games against playoff games, whatever have you. These high stakes games, right? We saw it last year when Georgia went to Missouri. They damn near lost that game. I mean, they should have lost that game. They got saved in the last minute there, but I just think, to me, that's something that this year you might have that thing. If it's a young team, they're not focused. They go into a game against South Carolina, Tennessee, Ole Miss, whatever have you, right? Or hell, maybe even Auburn, right? Some upsets could start happening. Georgia could lose 3 games this year. Do I think it's likely? Probably not. I mean, again, I know I've kind of said that. I think that's kind of where I pegged them at, as a 3-loss team this year to some of those teams we just mentioned. But I think it can happen, man. That's the weird thing about college football. Let's say you go in and you got a week 3 or 4 game against South Carolina. You lose South Carolina. That kind of, focus you, or does that kind of signal the end? Well, they're really not used to losing that much, especially over the last 2 years. So how do you respond to that? So to me, that's going to be kind of the interesting thing to see with Georgia this year.
The big thing with Georgia, I think the biggest thing with Georgia is your guys' quarterback. His first road game is against Auburn at Auburn. That will be huge. You know what I mean? They don't have Stetson Bennett, who was obviously a fucking veteran, played for like 15 years there for you guys.
His doctorate in football, bro.
Yeah, but didn't graduate. So I mean, so like that's a big thing with Carson Beck. I mean, that first road game, we know how hostile that Auburn environment is. It's probably the toughest place to freaking play in college football, regardless of what their record is. And Auburn fans, I said something nice about you. Please quit beating me up in the goddamn comment section all the time. But no, I do. It will be interesting. I think Georgia's going to play a couple close games. There'll give you some teams in there, Christian, at halftime. You guys might be down by 3 or tied up. You know what I mean? But I just think with Georgia, Kirby Smart, who I truly believe in, is a great coach, a great recruiter, a great motivator. And just the pieces that you guys got returning back will be the biggest part of your team this year. Can they get those younger guys to buy in? Because they got some spots to fill on the defensive side of the ball. Lost Nolan Smith. You guys lost some people to the NFL. Obviously, they play all on the Eagles now. So, it's amazing. But no, Georgia's going to be there, man. I will be surprised if Georgia is not in the playoffs. I would be shocked. Do they win it this year? I don't know, but I truly pegged them up there. LSU is a team that can stand in their way, just on the other side of that. So that's where I have Georgia. I really don't have much more to add about Georgia. I mean, I just that they're going to be relevant, dude, and I mean relevant as in winning another national title. The chances are pretty good, not pretty good, but they're 50-50 probably right now for me.
Yeah, well, that's what we're hoping for over here in this household.
I'm sure you are.
So, well, Chris, let's jump into your favorite segment here.
Oh, God.
Little hot take action. We'll get some people riled up in the Big Ten here if we haven't already.
Me.
Chris, hot take, Northwestern has under 4 wins this year. What do you think?
Let me pull this schedule up, Christian, before I even answer this question to make sure I'm right.
I got you right here.
Okay, brother. No. No, they don't. I don't think so.
You don't think they have under 4 win this year?
Oh, no, sorry. Okay, I read that wrong. No, they will. I thought it was reversed. No, they're not winning 4 games this year. No. Hell no. You got Rutgers. I actually think they can beat Rutgers. I know that may become a shock to you, Christian. You're a low-key Rutgers Scarlet Knight fan down there in Georgia. But, yeah, no. So, no. UTEP, you guys got a chance to start off 2-0. Here's my problem. You're not beating Duke. You're not beating Minnesota. You're definitely not beating Penn State. You beat Howard. There's my 3. Nebraska, Maryland, Iowa, Wisconsin, Purdue, Illinois. Hell no. Northwestern is one of the weirdest programs under Pat Fitzgerald I've ever seen. Now, I know he played there. He was a hell of a football player. He brought them to national relevancy. I know if anybody doesn't know this, back in the day, Northwestern was the doormat of college football and the Power 5 forever. And what he's done with that program over the years, Chris, you remember a couple years ago, they shocked the world in some of those games. They beat Iowa. They beat some, competed with Iowa State coming down to Ohio State coming down to the wire, right? They've done that several times. They're always that weird team. One year they'll have like 10 wins, and next year they'll have 2. I don't know, but what I saw out of Northwestern last year after they beat Nebraska week 1,
Yeah.
I don't know if they won a fucking game the rest of the year.
They did not, actually.
Yeah, so that's my point. Like, this is where I'm at. So I don't have a lot on Northwestern because, like, I think Pat Fitzgerald, his time is kind of done there, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
No,
I think he's a really good coach. I think he's super loyal. I just think they need to go under somebody else, and it's time for a change. It's nothing against him. He passed up on a lot of other jobs, too, by the way, in the past.
He definitely did, and the part of the hard thing is, look, like you said it wasn't even that long ago. Pat Fitzgerald was considered one of the best coaches in the Big Ten.
I know.
I mean, he really was. And while I think he's still a great coach. Like, I don't think that takes anything away from his ability to coach.
No.
I just think the ceiling has been reached at Northwestern. Chris, we just touched on it. They won exactly 1 game last year, and I'm not even trying to say this to be an asshole.
But you are.
Sure, Cornhuskers. Right? They've lost to Southern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, and the rest of the Big Ten last year.
Yeah,
we're looking at their schedule this year. I think Rutgers with Greg Schiano, that I don't think is going to be a win. We look at UTEP. I mean, to me, the only games I really see that they have a legit shot is UTEP and Howard. Duke, had a great year last year, and they beat them. So the reason why I say that is, hell, and who even knows, man? They could even lose to Howard or UTEP.
No,
right?
I agree. That's my problem. I am not high on Rutgers at all. So like, I don't think Rutgers is that good. I think because it's the first game of the year, that's why I kind of throw that one out there. Rutgers has been a better program the last year or so than obviously Northwestern, though. But I will say that I know I'm not sure UTEP is a pushover for them. It's not. I think all those games come close. Hell, Howard might even walk away with a dub.
Yeah. I mean, the problem was they had to reshuffle the staff this year, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to have to find a way to be more explessive on offense, because last year they were one of the worst teams in all of college football. They ranked 128th in total offense last year. They're one of the worst teams.
Jesus. Yeah.
And I know people are going to say, they're going to come in, they're going to say, well, we added certain pieces in the portal, right? Like they are going to say, we added Cincinnati's quarterback, right, from last year in the portal. Yeah, I understand that. But you also lost Peter Skoronski to the NFL. So who the fuck's going to block for him?
Yeah, that guy was a stud offensive lineman. He was actually regarded as probably the number 1 offensive lineman. Could have been taken off the board in the NFL. No, I'm with you. I'm glad we touched on Pat Fitzgerald, because that's where I was really getting to. When I think Northwestern, I think of him and what he's done for that program. Like I said, 20 years ago, dude, they were the doormat of like 40 years in the Big Ten. I mean, what he did there, they had some crazy good season where they knocked off Penn State, played Ohio State, super, super tough. And I think they might even made a Big Ten title game one time. I don't remember off the top of my head. But what he's done there is great. But you said it perfectly. They've reached their ceiling, man. It's time, I think, that either they got to revamp something over there, and you just touched on it, 128th on offense. What is that, like 14 points a game, maybe? Or 10? I don't know. It's horrible. Especially in the Big Ten, where there are a lot of good defenses, obviously. So,
yeah, and I don't think defensively they were terrible.
No, they've always been.
I mean, they kind of held, again, and I'm not even trying to bring it up again, but they held Nebraska in check, and Nebraska had a pretty damn explosive offense.
Well, Nebraska was up by 17 in that game, and then our great fearless leader in Scott Frost, as some of my chat knows, that fucking douchebag decided to onside kick to try to put it up by 24, and then the whole game turned around, and we lose in typical Nebraska fashion. Trust me, I'll never forget. It was played over in Ireland last year, first game of the year. But yeah, they didn't win a single game after that. If that doesn't tell you how bad Nebraska really has been, even worse, Northwestern they're at a point now where it's like, I know they're a really big academic school. A lot of smart people go there. I understand that, but it's time. It's time to roll the dice. Pat Fitzgerald, I think, could go find another job somewhere else, and I do think he's a great guy. I do. They don't recruit. They don't get kids like Nebraska does. They don't get like. You know what I mean? That's what's really sad about this, to bring in Nebraska. But, Nebraska had 10 times better players on the field than Northwestern did, and Northwestern
100%.
still beat them. Northwestern doesn't get a lot of those 4-star, even 3-star kids. They really, truly don't.
No, you're exactly right. Chris, one thing I'll say about this, and we'll kind of wrap it up on this, before we get into the 2 minute. Actually, we'll go right into the 2 minute drill here, but I'll kind of say this to segue it in. Be sure to comment, and we'll talk whatever you guys want to talk about at this point of the show.
Yeah. Please hit the thumbs up too, guys. That helps the algorithm out, by the way. Please.
Damn right. I just learned what that word meant today. I was gonna say, I think you had touched on if they. Let me throw this scenario out here at you, right? I would kind of actually be interested to see this. Pat Fitzgerald, like him as a coach, I think he's done really great. I think he's just so limited at Northwestern that there's just not shit else he can do. I mean, there's really nothing else he can do. Let's say Pat Fitzgerald gets fired, right? Texas A&M fires Jimbo.
Hey,
what if they brought old Pat Fitzgerald down to Texas A&M? Gave him
give him those kind of talent, give him those kind of players, man. I think because he's never had even a tenth of that type of talent on a team. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To ever coach, if you're him, I agree. That's an interesting scenario, dude. Pat Fitzgerald, I don't think they'll ever fire him. I think it'll be one of those deals under closed doors where they'll be like, hey, we want to go a different direction. He'll be like, hey, I want to walk away. They love him there. He played there. Yeah. I mean, he's their he is the face of their. Every time I hear Northwestern, I think of Pat Fitzgerald automatically.
I brought this up a lot last year, and I got a lot of grief for it. I thought Nebraska should have went out and got him. That's who I thought they did. Now, obviously, I understand a lot of people came in and said, well, that's never going to happen. He's a, Northwestern alumnus. Like, that's where he wants to be at. I understand that, but you just went 1-11. This is a situation where could you imagine him and we just kind of touched on it, could you imagine him at a program where he has all the resources to be able to do what he wants to do?
Right.
If he had an offensive line full of Peter Skoronskis.
Oh, Jesus.
And,
they would never throw the ball, ever.
Yeah,
ever.
Right.
Third and 8, running it.
Yeah.
Fullback give. He's an old school player, obviously, and coach. That's just how he is. I love him. I love him for that reason, though. Like, he's a good guy. You guys ever listen to him talk, by the way? He's a great dude. He's a stand-up guy. As I said, he don't get near enough love for what he's done with that program. I know last year isn't the end-all, be-all for that, but, I'd like to see him go somewhere else where he has, like you said, the resources available to be able to recruit and bring players in that fit his scheme. He's an interesting dude. He's an interesting coach. I'll leave it at that, Christian. I'm right on board with you there.
Well, Chris, I think this brings us to a pretty good little stopping point here.
Yeah.
So, well, I think we should be back probably. When are we getting back on next time? Is it going to be on Tuesday next week?
Yeah, I think. No, not Tuesday. Wednesday. We're on Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're gonna kind of switch. Yeah, Tuesday's the 4th. I forgot all about that.
Yeah. I don't know what you do for the 4th. Apparently, don't celebrate the USA. Clearly.
I mean, listen, dude.
Probably have a Georgia day or something. Is that what you guys do down there? You guys all walk around butt naked with your Georgia helmets on and rub wieners and stuff?
Dude, it's bare feet drinking sweet tea and moonshine. Fuck. God damn it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, Song of the South, a little sweet potato pie, shut my mouth. That's what we do. That's our national anthem.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you guys do.
I think we're going to go. So we're going to go Wednesdays. One thing we're going to do is we're probably going to move the shows up, especially on Fridays. Just accommodates our schedule a little bit better, gives us a little more time to kind of have our weekends and stuff. But we're probably going to start starting the shows, and we're going to probably try to go a little bit longer, especially on the Friday shows. Now that we're getting nearer to the season kicking off, so that'll be pretty good for us.
Yeah, we do have a lot in store, guys. It's going to get a lot better here. Like I said, I keep saying this not to knock on college football during this time of year, but it's not a lot going on dead time of the year right here. So we're going to be ramping it up quite a bit here with shows, a lot of in-depth games, stuff like that. Like I said, big things are going to happen here. Write it down. I'm not saying that because we're on YouTube. I'm saying that because Christian and I truly do care about college football. Been covering this for a long time. We want to see you guys get more involved. We want to see the channel grow. Like I said, we'll be here. You guys are gonna see some really good football content coming up.
I'm right. We'll catch everybody back on Wednesday. Have a good 4th. Let's make sure we get through this with all 10 digits, by God, and we'll fucking see you fucks a little later on.
All right, see you guys.